The strange and the spooky, adventurous and loony, they're all together ooky, the Bond family. Their trips are amazing when people come to see 'em. They really are amazing, the Bond family. History, ghost, art. So put on a witch's shawl on, a seat so you can relax on. We're gonna play a call on the Bud family. It is Wednesday, just a few more days before our renewal. We are still waiting on pieces. Joe's uniform should be in this weekend, hopefully by Friday. Joe's ring will hopefully be here by Friday. So yeah, we're still waiting, mostly on Joe's stuff. But his is more professional than mine is. Mostly because I couldn't decide what I wanted, and so I went simply. Plus, I also want to get down a little bit before I buy something that I'm going to keep for, more occasions. Although I do plan on wearing what I have more than once. Anyway, but before all that, we have a race for you of clowns. I've chosen a clown race because, it's Halloween and spooky season, and clowns are spooky. So here we go. Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I support you. This shout out is for our friends. Let's see who it is today. There we go. All right. So we have got, I see Bobby. I see my Linda. I see Big Ben. There's Stephen, Tina. There's Brad, Black Beauty. Hillbillies, Uma. There's Mark. There's Kyra. I'm probably mispronouncing that, so I apologize. There's Gracie. There's Josie. Prime. Sea Tripping. Big Ben. Rowdy, I saw briefly. Reverend. There's Lucia, I think. There's Lower. There's Stats. RC. Eastad. Looks like it's going to be Miss Gracie. Hold on. Alright, so this is Mrs. Gracie. She does Village Life. So she's got a lot of premieres that she does about life in the village in Kenya, and then some shorts, again, about village life, food, things like that, and some lives. I haven't caught on live recently, which is not good, but I have caught the most of the premieres. So check her out, like, share, comment. Have a good day. Okay, we are recording things. I'm recording deep, dark, no wait. I'm sorry, it's not Halloween time yet, just...
Not quite.
We're doing fun things. Exciting things. Book things, sort of.
Semi-weird things.
Semi-weird?
Semi-weird.
Not totally weird?
Not totally weird.
Alright then.
After all, it is fantastic things.
It is it?
Sort of.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, today's topic, being in October, we have a fellow who was born on the 8th of October in 1920. American science fiction author. He was the brainchild behind one of my favorite movies of all time. Recently, they just got done doing the movie for the third time. Our fellow, Mr. Frank Herbert Jr., the author of Dune. Now, he was born in Tacoma, Washington, to a Franklin Patrick Herbert Sr. and Eileen Herbert. Maternal grandparents had come west in 1905 to join the Burley Colony in Kitsap County, one of many utopian communes springing up in Washington State beginning in the 1890s. His upbringing saw him spending a lot of time in the rural Olympic and Kitsap peninsulas. He was fascinated by books and could read much of the newspaper before the age of 5, had an excellent memory, and learned quickly. He had an early interest in photography, getting a Kodak box camera at age 10, a new folding camera in his early teens, and a color film camera in the mid-1930s. Due to his parents' drinking, he ran away from home with his little sister, 5-year-old Patricia Lou, in 1938 to live with Frank's favorite maternal aunt, Peggy Violet Roundtree, and her husband, Ken Roundtree Sr. Within weeks, Patricia moved back home, but Frank, 18, remained with his aunt and uncle. Well, he enrolled in high school at Salem High School, now North Salem High School, where he graduated the next year. In 1939, his parents and sister had moved to L.A., so Frank followed them. He lied about his age to get his first newspaper job at the Glendale Star. Herbert then returned to Salem in 1940, where he worked for the Oregon Statesman newspaper, or now the Statesman Journal, in a variety of positions, including as a photographer. Well, Herbert married Flora Lillian Parkinson in San Pedro, California in 1941. They had one daughter, Penelope, and divorced in 1943. During 1942, after the U.S. entry into World War II, he served in the U.S. Navy Seabees for 6 months as a photographer, but suffered a head injury and was given a medical discharge. Herbert subsequently moved to Portland, Oregon, where he reported to the Oregon Journal. Well, after the war, Herbert attended the University of Washington, where he met Beverly Ann Stewart in a creative writing class in 1946. They were the only students who had sold any work for publication. Herbert had sold 2 pulp adventure stories to magazines, the first to the Esquire in 1945 titled Survival of the Cunning, and Stewart had sold a story to Modern Romance magazine. They married in Seattle in 1946 and had 2 sons, Brian and Bruce, who died from pneumonia in 1993. Well, in 1949, Herbert and his wife moved to California, where they worked at the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Here they befriended the psychologists Ralph and Irene Slattery. The Slatterys introduced Herbert to the work of several thinkers who had influenced his writing, including Freud, Jung, Jaspers, and Heidegger. They also familiarized Herbert with Zen Buddhism. Herbert never graduated from college, and according to his son Brian, he wanted to study only what interested him, so he didn't complete the required curriculum. He would return to journalism and worked at the Seattle Star and the Oregon Statesman. He was the writer and editor of the San Francisco Examiner's California Living magazine for a decade. Well, in 1973, in an interview, Herbert stated that he'd only been reading science fiction about 10 years before he began writing in the genre, and he listed his favorite authors as H.G. Wells, Robert Heinlein, Paul Anderson, and Jack Vance. Now, Herbert's first science fiction story, Looking for Something, was published in an April 1952 issue of Startling Stories, then a monthly edited by Samuel Mines. 3 more of his stories appeared in 1954 issues of Astounding Science Fiction and Amazing Stories. His career as a novelist began in 1955 with the serial publication of Under Pressure in Astounding from November 1955. Afterward, it was issued as a book by Doubleday titled The Dragon in the Sea. The story explored sanity and madness in the environment of a 21st century submarine and predicted worldwide conflicts over oil consumption and production. It was a critical success, but not a major commercial one. During the time, Herbert also worked as a speechwriter for the Republican Senator Guy Cordon. Well, Herbert began researching for a book called Dune in 1959. He was able to devote himself wholeheartedly to his writing career because his wife returned to work full-time as an advertising writer for department stores and became the breadwinner during the 1960s. The novel Dune was publishing came out in 1965, which spearheaded the Dune franchise. He later told Willis E. McNilly that the novel originated when he was assigned to write a magazine article about sand dunes in the Oregon Dunes near Florence, Oregon. He got over-involved and ended up with far more raw material than he needed for an article. While the article was never written, it planted in Herbert the seed that would become Dune. Now, Dune took 6 years of research and writing to complete.
Wow.
Much longer than other commercial science fictions of the time. Herbert's environmental work in Oregon formed the basis of speculative ecological work of the Fremen, which parallels real-world efforts and tactics of sand dune management. Analog, formerly Astounding, but still edited by John W. Campbell, published it in 2 parts comprising 8 installments: Dune World from December 1963 and Prophet of Dune in 1965. It was then rejected by nearly 20 book publishers.
That sounds normal.
Yeah. I love this. One editor prophetically wrote, "I might be making a mistake of the decade, but..." Well,
that seems like an indication that you should be doing what you're doing.
All right. Sterling E. Lanier, an editor of the Chilton Book Company, known mainly for auto repair manuals, had read the Dune serials and offered a $7,500 advance, plus future royalties for the rights to publish them as a hardcover book. Herbert rewrote much of the text. Dune was soon a critical success. It won the Nebula Award for Best Novel in '65, then shared the Hugo Award with 1966 with Call Me Conrad by Robert Zelazny. Dune was not an immediate bestseller, although by 1968 Herbert had made $20,000 from it, far more than most science fiction novels of the time. It was not, however, enough to let him take up full-time writing.
What?
The publication of Dune did not open doors for him. It was the Satellite Post-Intelligencer's education writer from 1969 to 1972 and lecturer in general studies and interdisciplinary studies at the University of Washington. He worked in Vietnam and Pakistan as a social and ecological consultant in '72. In '73, he was the director-photographer for the television show The Tillers. He later noted, "I don't worry about inspiration or anything like that. Later, coming back and reading what I produced, I'm unable to detect the difference between what came easily and what I had to sit down and say, well, now it's writing time, and now I'll write." By the end of '72, Herbert had retired from newspaper writing and became a full-time fiction writer. During the '70s and '80s, he enjoyed considerable commercial success as an author. He divided his time between homes in Hawaii and Washington's Olympic Peninsula. His home in Port Townsend on the peninsula was intended to be an ecological demonstration project. During this time, he wrote numerous books and pushed ecological and philosophical ideas. He continued the Dune saga with Dune Messiah in '69, Children of Dune in 1976, God Emperor of Dune in 1981, Heretics of Dune in 1984, and Chapter House Dune in 1985. Herbert planned to write a 7th novel to conclude the series, but his death in 1986 left storylines unresolved.
Oops.
Now, other works by Herbert included The Godmakers in '72, The Dosadi Experiment in '77, The White Plague in '82, and books he wrote in partnership with Bill Ransom, The Jesus Incident in '79, The Lazarus Effect in '83, and The Ascension Factor in '88, which were sequels to Herbert's 1966 novel Destination Void. He also helped launch the career of Terry Brooks with the very
a few of his.
Yeah, says with the very positive review of Brooks' first novel, The Sword of Shannara, in '77.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
The hero's unconscious for like half the book.
Of course. Now, Herbert's change in fortune was shadowed by tragedy. In '74, his wife Beverly underwent treatment for lung cancer. She lived 10 more years, but her health was adversely affected by the treatment. In '78, Herbert was featured speaker at the Octagon 2 science fiction convention held at El Ranchero Tropicana in Santa Rosa, and in '79 he met with anthropologist Jim Funero, with whom he conceived the Contact Conference. In '81, Herbert was the guest of honor at Advent's '81 in Adelaide, South Australia. Beverly would die on February 7, 1984. Herbert completed and published The Heretics of Dune that year. In an afterword to 1985's Chapter House Dune, Herbert included a dedication to Beverly. The year 1984 was a tumultuous year in Herbert's life. During the same year of his wife's death, his career took off with the release of David Lynch's film version of Dune. Despite high expectations, a big-budget production design, and an A-list cast, the movie drew mostly poor reviews in the United States. However, despite a disappointing response in the U.S., the film was a critical and commercial success in Europe and Japan. Isn't that the way it usually happens, though?
It does.
You know, we suck at American film, but other countries seem to do well, and I always loved Dune.
I always thought Dune was awesome.
Because I mean, nothing against it. Alia.
Alia, that's a scary child. I'm sorry.
It's disturbed, the scary child. I also loved it at the end when he was fighting, what was it, Ralpha?
I think so.
And he literally didn't even have to use the weirding module. He just shoved the guy into the ground, yelling at him. I'm like, dude. In 85, after Beverly's death, Herbert married his former Putnam representative, Teresa Shackelford, the same year he published Chapter House Dudes, which tied up many of the saga story threads. This would be Herbert's final single work. The collection I was published that year, and Man of Two Worlds was published in 86. And he died of a massive pulmonary embolism while recovering from surgery for pancreatic cancer on February 11th, 1986 in Madison, Wisconsin, at age 65. Now, into the political field, Herbert was a Republican and an environmentalist. His political views have been variously described as conservative, reactionist, and libertarian. Herbert was politically active within the Republican Party and actually worked as a speechwriter for several politicians, including Senator Guy Cordon. Herbert also volunteered in the campaign of Republican William Bantz in the 1958 Senate election, who unsuccessfully challenged the incumbent Democrat Harry M. Jackson. Herbert was a critic of the Soviet Union. He was a distant relative of the Republican Senator Joseph McCarthy, whom he often referred to as Cousin Joe. However, he was appalled to learn McCarthy's blacklisting of suspected communists from working in certain careers and believed that he was endangering essential freedoms of citizens of the United States. Herbert also opposed American involvement in the war in Vietnam. He was critical of welfare, arguing an increased dependence on the state. Herbert believed that governments lie to protect themselves and that, following Watergate scandal, President Richard Nixon had unwittingly taught an important lesson in not trusting the government. He considered Nixon a better president than John F. Kennedy, calling the latter one of the most dangerous presidents this country had ever had. He praised Ronald Reagan for his pro-family and pro-individualist stances while opposing his foreign policy. In Chapter House Dude, he wrote, "All governments suffer a recurring problem. Power attracts pathological personalities. It's not that power corrupts, but it is magnetic to the corruptible. Some people have a tendency to become drunk on violence, a condition that they are quickly addicted." Frank Herbert also believes civil service to be one of the most serious errors we made as a democracy, and that bureaucracy negatively impacts the lives of people of all forms of government. He stated that every such bureaucracy eventually becomes an aristocracy and uses preferential treatment and nepotism in favor of bureaucrats as his main arguments. Kind of like what happens sometimes around here. Now, Frank Herbert used his science fiction novels to explore complex ideas, including involving philosophy, religion, psychology, politics, and ecology. The underlying thrust of his work was a fascination with the question of human survival and evolution. Herbert has attracted a dedicated fan base, many of whom have attempted to read everything he wrote, fiction or nonfiction. Indeed, such a devotion of some of his readers that Herbert was at times asked if he was founding a cult, a proposition which he much rejected. There are a number of key themes found in Herbert's work. Concerned with leadership, Herbert explored the human tendency to slavishly submit to charismatic leaders. He delved both into the flaws and potential of bureaucracy and government. Herbert was among the first science fiction authors to popularize ideas about ecology and systems thinking. He stressed the need for humans to think holistically and with regards to the long term. The relationship between religion, politics, and power, human survival and adaptation. Herbert writes of the Fremen, the Sardaukar, and the Nosati, who are molded by their terrible living conditions into dangerous super races. The Fremen, to me, I always thought they were awesome.
I thought they were too.
The ability that they were able to live underground in rock positions, very hard to find, and the fact that they, even though they did let the surface dwellers know that they had all the water that they needed, but they also treated the water as, what it was, the most important substance on the planet.
Right.
I mean, even to the point that what humans had of water within them was a valuable commodity. You know, human possibilities and potential. Herbert offered mentats, the Bene Gesserit, and the Bene Talix as different versions of human potential. The natures of sanity and madness. Frank Herbert was interested in the work of Thomas Szasz and the anti-psychiatry movement. Often, Herbert poses the question, what is sane? And while there are clearly examples of insane behavior and psychopathy that are found in his works, evidenced by characters such as Peter Devise, it is often suggested that normal and abnormal are relative terms when humans are sometimes ill-equipped to apply to one another, especially on the basis of statistical regularity. The possible effects and consequences of consciousness-altering chemicals, such as the spice in Dune Saga, but as well as the Jasper's fungus in the Santa Taraga barrier and the kelp in Destination Void sequence. How languages shape thought. More specifically, Herbert was influenced by Alfred Kominsky's general semantics. Aldous Budrys wrote that Herbert's knowledge of language and linguistics was worth at least one PhD and the chair of philology at a good New England college. Learning, teaching, and thinking. Frank Herbert refrained from offering his readers formulaic answers to many of the questions he explored. Now, Dune and the Dune Saga constitute one of the world's best-selling science fiction series of novels. Dune, in particular, has received widespread critical acclaim, winning again the Nebula Award and sharing the Hugo Award in '66, and is frequently considered one of the best science fiction novels ever, if not the best. Locus subscribers voted in the all-time best sci-fi novel in '75, again in '87, and the best before 1990 and 1998.
Wow.
So yeah, the fans have spoken. Dune is considered a landmark novel for a number of reasons. Dune is the landmark of soft science fiction. Herbert deliberately suppressed technology in his Dune universe so that he could address the future of humanity rather than the future of humanity's technology. Dune considers the way humans and their institution may change over time. Frank Herbert was a great popularizer of the scientific idea. In Dune, he helped popularize the term ecology. Gerald Jonas explains in the New York Times Book Review, so completely did Mr. Herbert work out the interactions of man and beast and geography and climate that Dune became the standard for an emerging subgenre of ecological science fiction. Now, Dune is considered an example of literary world building. The Library Journal reports that Dune is to science fiction as what Lord of the Rings is to fantasy. Arthur C. Clarke is quoted as making a similar statement on the back cover of a paper edition of Dune. Frank Herbert imagined every facet of his creation. He included glossaries, quotes, documents, and histories to bring his universes alive to the readers. No science fiction novel before it had so vividly realized life on another world. Now, Herbert never again equaled the critical acclaim he received for Dune. Neither the sequels nor any of the other books won a Hugo or Nebula Award, although most of them... Go back here. Neither the sequels, almost all of them were New York Times bestsellers. Now, Malcolm Edwards wrote in the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, much of Herbert's work makes difficult reading. His ideas were generally developed concepts, not merely decorative notions, but were sometimes embodied in excessively complicated plots and articulated in prose, which did not always match the best level of thinking. His best novels, however, were the work of speculative intellect with a few rivals in modern science fiction. He was inducted into the Science Fiction Hall of Fame in 2006. Now, California State Fullerton Pollock's Library has several of Herbert's draft manuscripts of Dune and other works with authors' notes in their Frank Herbert archives. Metro Parks Tacoma built a dune peninsula, and the Frank Herbert Trail on Point Defiance Park in July of 2019 to honor the hometown rider. Now, beginning in 2012, Herbert's estate in Wordfire Press released 4 previously unpublished novels in ebook and paperback format. High Up in 2012, Angels Fall in 2013, A Game of Authors in 2013, and A Thorn in the Bush 2014. In recent years, Frank Herbert's son, Brian Herbert, and author Kevin J. Anderson have added to the Dune franchise, taking those left behind by Frank Herbert and discovered over a decade after his death. Brian Herbert and Anderson have written 3 prequel trilogies, The Prelude to Dune, Legends of Dune, and The Great Schools of Dune, exploring the history of the Dune universe before the events of the original novel, 2 novels that take place between novels of the original Dune sequels, with plans for more, as well as 2 post-Chapter House Dune novels that complete the original series, Hundreds of Dune and Sandworms of Dune, based on Frank Herbert's own Dune 7 outline. So basically what you have here was a guy that lived and breathed Dune. He built his own world. Actually, he built more than world.
Right.
He built the solar system.
I wish I could do that, but it's you have to be so detailed.
Yeah.
Because you really have to build it from the ground up. Like, what do these people believe? Why do they believe? What do they wear? What do they eat? What do they...
Yeah. Because, I mean, you think about, just for an example, in 84, when they did the original David Lynch, he was able to take the 4 main planets, and with what he wrote, you almost could tell what they were like. You know, Arrakis, it's a desert planet. It's dry. They have dust storms. They have the sandworms.
Right.
Next up was Caladan, you know, and then there was the one the Harkonnens came from. But as much visual as he could put into each one of those worlds, he was able not only to describe them, but almost make you feel like, you know, you could see it. And that's one of the things that's really, I think, it's a key facet of his ability to write.
Right.
It's almost like you could picture yourself. You could feel the sand. But the other thing I was going to do with our happy dude here, let me pull this up because it kind of gives you an idea exactly how crazy this franchise went overall. You know, came out October 1st, 1965. The first edition was 412 pages. The paperback was 896. Now, again, you know, set in a distant future, feudal interstellar society, descended from terrestrial humans, in which various noble houses control planetary fiefs, tells the story of the young Paul Atreides, whose family reluctantly accepts the stewardship over the planet Arrakis. Dune. Talks about the spice. Herbert himself would write 5 sequels: The Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, God Emperor Dune, Heretics of Dune, and The Chapter House Dune. And again, following his death in 1986, his son Brian and author Kevin J. Anderson continued the series in over a dozen additional novels since 1999. Now, what's crazy is that, again, they made 2 films. He would actually get the newest one by Denis Villeneuve, released on October 21st, 2021, went on to be nominated for 10 Academy Awards, ultimately winning 6. The film roughly covers the first half of the original movie,
right?
The original novel. The sequel, which covers the second half, was released on March 1st, 2024, to critical acclaim, and both films have grossed over $1 billion worldwide.
I do say that the new ones did a good job with covering things that the first one didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of still have to splice them to get the full story.
Yeah, that's why I always tell people, if you're going to watch something and they've made an earlier version, go ahead and check out the earlier one too, because it'll give you one person's perspective of the movie, and then when you see the new one, you could go, well, this is a little different from that one, which kind of works.
And he's gonna go to a movie based on a book. Read the book first, because they never get it right.
Exactly. Now, this is the other point that I was going to dig up about this whole thing is, Dune has been translated into dozens of languages, has sold almost 20 million copies.
Oh, I'm not surprised with that.
That's a lot of frickin' books.
That is.
And, reviews of the novel have largely been positive, considered by some critics to be the best science fiction book ever written. And, regularly cited as one of the world's best-selling science fiction novels. Understandable. Again, like they were talking, Arthur C. Clarke described Dune as a unique and wrote, "I know nothing comparable to it except The Lord of the Rings." Robert A. Heinlein described the novel as powerful, convincing, and the most ingenious. Described as one of the monuments of modern science fiction by the Chicago Tribune, and P. Schuyler Miller called Dune one of the landmarks of modern science fiction, an amazing feat of creation. The Washington Post described it as a... Oops, gonna try not to sneeze.
Yeah.
Pineapple. Washington Post described it as a portrayal of an alien society more complete and deeply detailed than any other author in the field has managed. A story absorbing equally for its action and philosophical vistas, an astonishing science fiction phenomenon. So, yeah, for all the wonderful bits that we got out of Frank Herbert, we will thank you, and happy posthumous birthday. But this has been the Bearded Historian, folks, and we'll see you next week. Unless we take the week off, because we're going to be celebrating our renewal vows.
We would do no such thing, would we? What the hell would we do?
I know, we'd be highly bored.
We would be so bored.
We'll see you next week.
Also, if you haven't heard of Dune, read it, watch it, something. Where have you been? Get out of the rock.
Yeah, climb out, grab that copy from under the rock and bring it with you.
Who put it underneath the rock?
I don't know, it's going to be down there somewhere.
Uh-oh.